Hi, here we are looking at the final paper of our semester, a proposal, or as I like to call it, policy essay. Remember, I like to call it policy rather than proposal because we do short, small proposals for each of our essays, and I don't want to say, well, proposal for proposal, which gets a little confusing, so I usually call it policy. As I said in the introductory video, a policy essay is an essay where you propose a change to existing law, practice, policies, or regulations. Now, structurally speaking, there's some very interesting things that we can do in this essay. The first thing, there's your name block, of course, no change there. Here's the title, again, no change there. But the first big change is the presence of this, an abstract. An abstract is a summary. You've actually probably already read some abstracts doing research for previous essays. In other words, it's a little blurb, a summary, that is available to you before you read the article itself, so that you know what's in the article. A good abstract is almost like a miniature outline. Now, in terms of the process, you do not have to say the word abstract at the beginning here. A lot of abstracts do say the word abstract. If you don't, that's fine. If you forget, don't freak out. But you can say abstract, and you see a colon, and then the words of the abstract. An abstract should be a nice paragraph, between about 100 and 200 words, and that's about the size of the one that you're looking at right here. It is also set off from the left-hand margin. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see that the margin is really here. And so it's been set off to the same distance as the indentation. If you use a hanging indentation, it will do this for you. Okay, after the first line, of course, which you have to manipulate yourself. And the first line is indented further, so that's actually an indent. Then there is a break, a double, right? May remind some of you of a hamburger. But there's an extra line of, blank line, if you will, to physically separate. Now, because you do have a longer paper, you can take your introduction and break it out into 2 paragraphs. Remember, there's 3 things that we ask for you to do in an introduction: hook the reader, introduce the subject, and present the thesis sentence. But many of you may have felt a little constrained with the use of the hook. This 2-paragraph introduction says, okay, you can devote your first paragraph of your essay strictly to the hook. This would be great for an anecdote, in other words, a story, an example, a hypothetical situation. And you can have that be the whole first paragraph. Then the second paragraph introduces the subject of the paper, right? Focuses it down into what you really want to talk about, and then presents the thesis. The thesis on the proposal or policy paper is a concrete statement of what should be changed. And I would again suggest that you go to chapter 12 of Everything's an Argument. A should do B because of C, right? On page 287. This particular essay in front of us, and I have to confess to being a limited number of proposal samples here, so it's not a perfect paper, but this uses the 1-paragraph introduction, which is fine if that's what you want to do, okay? Second paragraph, animals used for testing to ensure the animal is inhumane, right? And to begin the process. You can look more carefully on your own time to see the use of MLA. See how animal welfare is in quotation marks when you're citing to a title, right? Then there's a concession. After the second paragraph of the introduction, we have a concession paragraph. Animal testing is currently used as a foundation for all levels of research, right? Many argue there is no alternative. Obviously, with animal testing, this is the issue. What else could there be if we don't have animal testing? This is a graded paper, so you can see I physically marked up some of the pieces. Again, that's not something that I like, but there we go. Here's the next section. You know from the assignment sheet that the essay is divided up into problems, solutions, and benefits. 3 major sections. So I have an introduction first. That doesn't count. I mean, it counts towards your words, of course, but not the structure of what I'm talking about. You have your introduction and concession. That's just like what we've done, except maybe longer. But instead of jumping into a regular main body paragraph, we begin with what's called problems. And you can see that it is physically set off with a subtitle centered on its own line. Now, most of my students find the problem section the easiest section to write because, honestly, you've already done this. This is equivalent basically to stating an argument of fact or causation. You have to show the existence of a problem. A problem does exist. That's like a claim of fact statement, right? Now, the problem section needs to identify the nature of the problem. Okay? Gives us the facts of the problem. Now, essentially, the way I look at it, there are 2 ways that we have problems. One is a problem that everybody agrees exists, right? Everybody says, yeah, this is a problem. So we might say something, for instance, like, well, Social Security is going to run out of money by year, blah, 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 right? And everybody can basically say, okay, yeah, that's true because the facts support that. And there isn't a lot of substantial argument where people say, no, it'll be fine. Other types of problems are problems that people disagree even exist. So if you were to talk about global warming, for example, as a result of human activity, and you're proposing changes of human activity, there may be some of your audience that, first of all, one, may not agree that global warming exists, or if they do, they may not attribute it to human activity, and therefore this needs to be shown. This needs to be proven. So, excuse me, this is the problem section, showing the nature of the problem. You are convincing the reader the problem exists, and you're showing the facts about the problem. Now, the temptation for a lot of students is to put a lot of effort into the problem section and very little into the rest of the essay. And again, I understand. This is because you're most comfortable. But this is a 3-part paper, not a 1-part paper. The solutions. The solutions to your problems need to be identified either with bullet points, such as you see here, or with steps. It depends on whether or not the solution lends itself to a sequence. First you do this, then you do that, then you do this other thing. Or are you working on multiple fronts all at the same time? So, with the solutions, these need to be concrete, specific, doable courses of action. They should not be pie in the sky, wouldn't it be nice kinds of things. They should be not things that are unbelievably expensive and therefore unrealistic. They should not be violations of human rights or constitutional rights that are inarguable. They should not be basically a feel-good where you say somebody should do something which is not really backed by law. So, for instance, people shouldn't spend so much time on their cell phones is not something you can do anything about, really. The solutions need their own sources. And as I said in the video, introducing this assignment, I don't expect you necessarily to come up with ideas that nobody ever before has thought of. You can, of course, piggyback, if you will, on top of existing ideas, as long as you give credit where credit is due. Okay? And so you see here in this essay, different bullet points, but they all have data. They all have sources. They all have support. Okay? So the solution section, not surprisingly, in many ways, is the single most important section. This is what makes your paper different from an argument of fact or an argument of causation. The third and final major section of the paper, we label benefits. This is the section that I'm afraid a lot of students don't spend enough time with. They think, oh, I identified a problem, I talked about the nature of the problem, and then I showed you the solutions. The end. No, it's not the end. You need the benefits as well. In other words, you are applying the solutions to the problems. You are showing, okay, you are showing rather than assuming that good things will result. If a problem is not completely solved, it is at least made better, made easier to deal with, lessened the nature of the problem. And again, a good paper will have sources that show these benefits. Okay? And we go through. And this is the last paragraph here. The conclusion, let me scroll back up. The conclusion also has three things that it needs to do. Remember, restate the thesis, look at the big picture. And one good way to look at the big picture is to ask the question, so what? In the case of policy essays, often this will be an argument that good things will result. It kind of extends off of the benefits very nicely in that respect. A prediction for the future, for example. And then we bring the whole thing to a good final close with the clincher, right, the final sentence of the essay. And there's a word count, a mere 3,100 words. Your requirement, of course, right now is for 2,500 words. You can always go more, as this student has done here. Works cited page, pretty nicely done. 8th edition. I encourage you to look it over. This person very gratefully understood that when you have EBSCOhost, you do not give me the URLs for EBSCOhost sources unless it's a DOI, which is different anyway. Alphabetical order. You can see how I grade by hand. You might be grateful that I don't grade your papers by hand. I'm not sure how many sources this is, but it's way more than the minimum. And in this case, they also have a Works Consulted page. Sadly, they didn't pay enough attention to put these in alphabetical order, so as impressed as I was that they gave me a Works Consulted, I was unimpressed that they couldn't bother to alphabetize it. Nevertheless, it's nice to have. You could have notes, you could have figures as well. This particular essay does not, but you've learned how to do them. And the point of learning how to do them is to use them whenever it's helpful to make your essay better.